this week's episode of Hotter Than Health. My name is Eliza Gelman. This is a podcast that focuses on wellness, nutrition, health, a holistic lifestyle, and really asking all of the questions that you may have on topics that you're not so sure about. And selfishly, this week, I wanted to learn about mold. You, like a lot of us, have likely seen that mold is having its heyday, everybody. It hasn't just come around, but the topic has become more and more prevalent. And I really believe that that's because so many of us are spending more time inside, more time indoors, working at home, being lethargic, sitting on our couches all day, and then, of course, sleeping in our homes. We spend so much time in our homes that it's so vital to have a conversation about mold. If you are like me and you have experienced more of your friends, people around you, or even yourself having symptoms that you don't think you've had before, or maybe you're noticing these insidious small things that are happening within your body or your mind or your skin or your digestion that seem off, but you can't quite figure it out. Maybe you've been to doctors, maybe you have taken supplements, maybe you have read all of the articles and all of the books, but you can't quite figure it out. And then you go on vacation for 3 days, 4 days, 5 days, and you feel better. And then maybe you come home and those symptoms start to trickle back in. That's not the only way to know if there's mold happening in your house, but one of the most interesting things that I learned in this conversation was that if you are living in a home that may have mold or a decent amount of mold, you guys will not and likely will not express symptoms in the same way. If someone is in your home having a lot of headaches and another person is really just having some skin issues, that could be related back to the same root cause. I loved this conversation. Not only did we talk about what types of symptoms we might be seeing, but we talked about how this can affect hormones. We talked about how it can affect skin. What is actually going on with mold? And the wild thing is that we don't even necessarily need to always just worry about the mold we can see. That is why it's so important to do your due diligence and not only put in those preventative measures, but ask the right questions. Listen to your body and really focus on your intuition when it comes to how you're feeling. We deep dive into all things mold, home health. What can we do right after listening to this episode? What are some things that we can do to prevent mold from spreading, from preventing it from getting there in the first place? And it's not always what you think, and there's not just one way to detect. So you're going to leave this episode with tangible tips and takeaways, and you're going to be able to figure out whether or not it is the right time for you to get a mold inspection. He also debunks a lot of fears that we have about mold, and that made me feel a lot better because sometimes we think, oh, well, if we have mold, we got to redo the whole house. We got to strip the walls, take out the floorboards. That's not really, he wants to present this in a different way, and it calmed me down, made me feel great, and I'm just excited to be able to have you all have this information as well. Without further ado, I want to bring to you Brian Karr, and Brian Karr is the mold guy. He really is. Brian Karr is the go-to expert when it comes to the invisible threats lurking in our homes like molds and mycotoxins. He's the co-founder of We Inspect and the Dust team. Brian has lent his expertise to thousands and thousands of clients focusing on creating healthier living spaces. And he says it's like having an indoor environment superhero who's dedicated not just to fixing, but transforming spaces. He is a wealth of knowledge. I learned so much, could have talked to him for hours, so make sure you go check him out. But without further ado, let's bring Brian Karr on to the podcast. Welcome. Brian Karr, welcome to the Hotter Than Health podcast. Thank you so much for being here. How are you?
I'm great. I love your podcast name too.
You can thank my younger cousin, Neil. It was like 7 years ago, and I posted an Instagram story. I said, what are some ideas for a name? And this just popped out, and it was pre-ChatGPT. So it totally authentic, not my
Full
creativity,
human.
but full human. Full human. Shout out Neil Ferguson. Either way, let's hop back to you. Okay. We are talking today about mold, just the world's sexiest topic. And I think that it is something that we, as listeners, as just humans living a day-to-day life, are likely exposed to constantly. But we've only just recently started talking about mold toxicity, how it affects our brain, our overall health. But you don't often talk to people who have an expertise in mold. So I want to start with how you got here, Brian. What got you into this very specific space, and what has been your evolution within mold?
Well, as a very young boy, I had this fascination with mold, and I was just like, "Mom, I don't want to do sports. I want to do mold." And literally, no one's ever done that. And I didn't do it either. Uh, Most people in this industry, I don't even say the industry because there's like tangent industries, but like who are focused on this, generally had something happen to them or a family member, and that's sort of how they even figured out it was a thing that you could even talk about or do or whatever, right? And so that's what happened to me. I lived in an apartment in West Hollywood. For those of you who don't know what those look like, they are old buildings and they are not well taken care of. And I was in my room one day, this is like late 2000s. Um, it was right around the time of the economic downturn around that time. I had just been laid off of my job at an ad agency, and I was sitting on my bed and I was on monster.com and I was typing job that will make me feel fulfilled. Literally, I was writing this and this doesn't exist. I don't know what to tell you. And then as soon as that happens, I feel something on my hand. I look down, there's like a little drip on my hand, right?
Ew.
And then I track it up. I look up and I see like those time lapse videos where it like goes really fast and you're like, oh, it's super pretty. Well, that happened in real time in what I was looking at. So it was a stain starts getting bigger, ceiling starts getting kind of like that, like bubble in it when water starts filling like the drywall, and then it
Ugh.
burst down. So I like grab my computer and I jump out of my bed, like right before it like burst down on my bed. And obviously it was a big water issue. Call the landlord and the guys who come and stop the leak and do all these things, right? And so they do whatever they need to do. They dry it out. They do all this stuff. I'm like, okay, cool. We'll get it all patched up here in the next, couple days or whatever. And that was kind of that, right? And this is what most people do who don't know anything about this. So like, call my landlord. They own buildings. They must know how to deal with this stuff,
Hmm.
right? And so you have them and you come do it. And um, what happened over the next several weeks to then a few months was I started getting symptoms that I never had before. Now, I'm not going to work now, right? So I'm still at home. I had a roommate, I was young at the time. You have a roommate. So you're like locked in your room more time than you are like spending out in the rest of the house,
Spending
right?
way more time at home. Hmm.
Yeah, exactly. And so now I'm in this space a lot. And the first thing that started happening was I started getting like neurological symptoms. Specifically, I will preface this where I didn't have like severe cases of like chronic health issues like a lot of people do, right? But for me,
Sure.
it's like, whoa, this is not normal, right? And so for
When you
me,
go from totally normal, everything's fine, to whoa, a drastic difference.
exactly, exactly. And so the first thing already maybe from listening, I talk quick, I'm fast, I that's just kind of how I am. And I started noticing I was slower, I wasn't as sharp. I was like, this is weird. I have to think longer before things come up. Like I was like in my mid 20s, like this, shouldn't be happening. And so that started happening. And then at the time I was dating who's now my wife, and her dad, who ultimately became my mentor and my pathway into this, literally the top person in the country at doing this, what we're going to talk about today.
Oh, wow.
And so she tells me, she's like, hey, you sound like a lot of like my dad's clients that he tells me about, like what you're talking about. Um, and I was like, oh, she's like, you might have a mold issue. So what do I do? I don't ask her dad, who's like literally the best in the world at this. I call the landlord again, like an idiot. I'm like, hey, I think I have a mold problem. Is it in the landlord's best interest to say he has a mold problem? Absolutely not, right? So they bring in, what most local inspectors do. Comes in, puts an air sample pump in the middle of my room, runs it for 5 minutes, leaves 24 hours later, tells me there's no mold in my room. I have no mold problem. Must be something else. Your body must be broken. I don't know what to tell you, right?
Ugh,
This is what happens to
gaslighting.
everybody. This is what everybody gets gaslit. This is exactly what happens to people. And so it continued. And then I took the word. I was like, oh, this was a mold inspector that came in, right? Again, like not knowing any better. And then I wake up and I go to wash my face and I have like eczema breakout like on my face. And the brain not working wasn't a big enough issue apparently, but God forbid the face starts getting messed
When
up.
it
And
becomes tangible and you can physically see it, that's what motivates people.
yeah, so then I was like, fine, let's call your dad. Like, what's going on, right? I'd only been dating her for a couple months. I didn't really want this to be the pathway into the family. Anyways, that's what happened. He comes out, long story short, mold in all the walls of my room. So with that much water that happened up there, think about like your kitchen island. If you had just like a big pitcher of water and you pour the water on your island, it's going to go sideways until there's no more island, and then it's going to go down the side of the island when it
Yeah.
gets to the end. So it happened in my room. So all the water went to the walls and then went straight down all of the walls. And I was basically living in a toxic box for months, and it was getting me, right? And it was continuing to impact me.
Mm.
So he helped me, I'll fast forward. He helped me get out of it. He helped me figure it out, got out of my lease, and we're now after the fact. And I was still looking for a job, right? I was still typing in job that makes me feel fulfilled. Like for real, I wrote that on in Monster. And now I've got this situation where like I got my health was impacted. It was better. I saw what like joke inspector does over here, and I saw what like a real one does, and I saw the difference. And then I started talking to him, and eventually I just said, "Hey, I want to work. I want to work for you. I want to do this." And that's kind of how it started.
Wow, a true family business.
It is a
That is
true
one way
family
to
business.
get the girl. One
I
way
was
to get the girl.
I was all in on her and the business because that was a few months in. You don't go work with your girlfriend's dad if you're not all in on the girl. That's
Yeah.
rule number one for all you guys out there.
Yeah, if anyone's trying to figure out this dating scene, it's just get with the dad first. Just get good with the dad. Start there.
Start it there.
That's amazing. And the interesting thing is that you're saying is it wasn't that you had these splitting headaches. It wasn't completely debilitating, but it was just enough to throw you off. It was just enough to ring those alarm bells. And with how much with how much time people are spending indoors now, I feel like if there's any mold, then it would be nearly impossible to not be impacted in some way, whether it be your sleep, whether it be your skin. And again, with eczema, you might think, oh, lay off dairy, lay off gluten. I mean, there's a lot of little things, and I think that mold is this insidious factor that seems one, really tough to combat, two, tough to even recognize. So let's
Mhm.
really start with that. So you said that you went from one extreme to another. So feeling ill to feeling well to having mold in your home to no mold in your home and you're thinking, okay, there's something to this. What we were looking at this earlier as I was doing some research, but when it comes to mold and water damage, what are some of like the top signs that people might be seeing that may not be explained by, it's probably PMS or menopause or whatever that is. What are some things that people might be feeling or noticing that could be attributed to mold?
Yeah, this is the problem because it's not linear. It's not like I ate bad food and got food poisoning, my stomach hurts, right? Like it's not straight like that, and that makes it really complicated. The mold exposure piece, like from like a top, like if you're not getting into the specifics of the body, you're just kind of like throwing an analogy on it. It looks for the weakest link in your body, and that's where it manifests the problem, right?
Okay, okay.
And so it's hard because as your body is impacted by something, it's going to react, but it doesn't always react in the same way for every person. And that's how like external influences impact people. So, when you're talking about like what are the symptoms, what are the signs, what are the things, I'll give you a couple like things to think about like big picture without getting to every single symptom because literally it's every system of the body and there's symptoms running across all of
Sure.
them. It could
Like
be
my digestion might be more susceptible to some kind of weakness than someone else. Their equivalent would be their skin. Or,
exactly.
okay,
Exactly.
okay.
So what I kind of like talk to people about is looking at a couple different patterns in a way. So the first one is multi-system, multi-symptoms, right? So for me, when my story, one system was neurological, the other one was whatever skin is called. I don't know what system is technically called.
The epidermis.
Yeah, great. Kudos for you. You get a gold star. Uh,
It's not right, but it sounds good, doesn't it?
so I had two different systems of the body that were impacted, and I had symptoms across both, right? So when you have multiple areas of your body that are kind of like firing and are being like, yo, there's something wrong here, right? They don't do that independently, usually, right? So there's got to be something that they're both responding to that's making them both freak out in a certain way, right? Like, you're in your house and somebody busts into your house and breaks into your house, you and I are standing together. You might go run into one room and I might go do something else. We're doing two different things. You're calling the cops. I'm going to get a bat to hit the guy, like whatever it is, right? We're doing two different things, but it's all triggered by the same guy busting into the house,
I
right?
see. I see.
And
It reminds me of, sorry to cut you off, but on the other end of things, when something is looking for the most susceptible, easy access point, it almost reminds me of if you have a headache, you're going to take an Advil. The Advil isn't made for a headache. It's made for any type of pain that's actively going on in my body. So if Jill next to me has a broken foot and her foot hurts, I have a headache, we both take the same pill, we're both going to get, okay, so it's going to go to different parts of your body based on what has the inflammation, what has the problem, or what has the susceptibility.
yeah, exactly. And like, it's even like with colds and sicknesses and stuff, like, my wife has a headache, but my stomach hurts. But like maybe we're kind of impacted by the same thing, possibly, right? Like just how is it like hitting us harder than the other one? There's a lot of variability in individuals. And so the one big thing though is like if you can see that there's different areas of your body that are being impacted, that means that like multiple things are kind of getting triggered. That's a really big environmental trigger sign. That's one. A second one is, now we are just talking about one individual person. Now here's the second one. And in that scenario, by the way, it is super, super, super common for one person in the house to have whatever symptoms and issues they're having and nobody else. Super common. So this becomes an issue like generally women are the ones that are, whether they're more impacted or more in tune with being impacted, I'm not sure which it is, but they're usually the ones kind of driving the ship, I guess I would say with this. And so a lot of times the man, the partner, in the house, they'll be like, listen, there's two types actually. There's one who's like, you're crazy, I'm not interested. There's the other one that's like, I believe that you're not feeling good, but it doesn't make sense that it's the house because I'm breathing the same air and I'm fine, right?
Hmm.
And it's a very logical response. Like it
Yeah.
makes sense if you are looking so high out and don't understand how the body works, right? But that is probably more common than not that one person in the house is really impacted. Maybe the others aren't, or they don't know that they are, right? Like maybe one of their sleep just isn't as good, or maybe one of the kids just kind of has like a cough all the time, but it's not like severe like the person who's really driving it.
Yeah.
So
Or, oh, they're just going through a phase, or, oh, yeah.
yeah. So in that scenario, that's one person in the house that's kind of like, I'm the one that's impacted. Now, the next scenario is there's multiple people in the house that are having something going on, right? Generally different systems of the body, right? But they're all noticing something. So this is where, oh, my kids have, or maybe your kids are the ones that are more impacted, right? So maybe my kids are dealing with, neurological impacts or behavior issues or things like that. So like we're really concerned about our kids. But then husband over here, isn't sleeping well, or maybe he's having like, bowel issues, digestive issues or whatever. And maybe the mom is feeling something or not, right? But like when you have multiple people in the house, that are all having different symptoms and things that are going on, it's like, what is this house doing to us almost is how people feel about it. And if you mentally get to that point, at least you're anchoring the house as like the thing that might be the trigger. A
Yeah.
lot of times people don't even get that far. And it's like, oh, well, the kids are going to school and I'm getting older and here's all the rationale for all the symptoms that are happening, right? So if you're seeing a multiple type of system symptom situation in the house across different people in the house is a really, really big clue that there's an environmental trigger and it's just manifesting different in people. I'd say the third thing is if you happen to leave like on vacation or something for a few days and you're on vacation, you're like, oh, I feel great. This is awesome. And you think it's because you're on vacation, you're not working, and you're outside by the beach. You think all these things, right? And then you come back and you don't feel good. That is like big, big, huge indicator as well. Because now you've removed yourself from a situation. Your body is like, oh, I'm not constantly getting punched in the face every day. This is great. I feel much better right now. And then I come back home and bam, punch me in the face again. I don't feel good. except I notice it really more now because I just spent 5 days without getting assaulted, right? And so you
Yes.
notice it more. So I would say those are like some like scenarios or like situations that you could kind of keep an eye on. And those are really big clues that there might be environmental impacts that are going on in the house.
Do you have any specific examples of seeing a family that presented multiple different bodily system symptoms, and then you said, oh, bing, 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 every single one of y'all has. I assume that every single home has some ounce, iota, teeny little bit, but enough, not enough to make a huge impact. Have you seen stories of these families and then did something about the mold, remediation, detection, all of that, and then they said, "Oh my gosh, you've saved our lives," or something along those lines?
Yeah, I mean, I've literally had people tell me I saved their lives. I remember the first time somebody did. So yes, so like if you're in a scenario like that, so like the part of our process is when somebody comes in to work with us, we kind of model our process after like how functional doctors work. So like if you're going to go work with a doctor, at first there's some sort of onboarding process. Let me give me your family history, give me your this, give me your that. Let me understand all this stuff. So we have our version of that we do before an inspection even happens. And so we'll talk through kind of what are your goals, what's going on, what made you pick up the phone and call us, right? And then we'll talk through then like just kind of home details about their houses and things like that, right? So usually when we're talking about the first thing, it's most people don't pick up the phone to call us just because they wanted a mold inspection that day. Like nobody does this because they want to. And really nobody even does it preventatively, which maybe you should, but most people don't, right? So usually something is happening that's then causing them to take this action to get into this, right? And so when we dig into that, we start learning a lot about the symptoms that are happening across the different people in the house, what clinical testing they've done or not done, or all these things. We start kind of like, and we hear their story. I went to so many doctors, and then after that, they couldn't figure it out. And then finally, I found Dr. So-and-so who connected me with you after they ran
Hmm.
this test, right? And it kind of like works like that. But there are a lot of scenarios where you'll have one kind of the first scenario I talked about, or maybe even the second one, where there's like one key person, but maybe some other people are having lesser types of symptoms that are going on. So the first person will get, let's say, like a urine mycotoxin test done. The doctor will have them do that. They suspect there's a mold issue. So then the
So,
first
and
person,
that's just a test for my mold virgin ears. A myotoxin test is just you test your own body for mold.
yeah, so it's a urine test that you can do that will look in your urine and see if there's mold toxins that are coming out of your urine, meaning that you're excreting it out of your body. And it's called a mycotoxin. So that's a test that doctors will, have people do, right? So they'll look at their patient and be like, okay, I think you might have a mold issue in the house. Let's do this. There's some other tests that they do because not everyone's perfect, but in this scenario, they do this, there's mycotoxins, right? So the family I'm thinking about, they then had the husband and the two kids all do mycotoxin tests too. Their symptoms were not anything like what the mom was, who was the one who's really driving it. She had Lyme also. So she was more compromised than other people. And so it was hitting her harder. Comes back, all of them have mycotoxins in their body, and that they were all pretty high levels that were in there. So now the husband is like surprised. He's like, I mean, I feel generally okay. I mean, I've been tired and like maybe more fatigued than normal and maybe more, this, that, or the other than normal. But like connecting that dot isn't a dot that anyone would naturally connect,
Yeah.
right? And so you see that, like, so that happens really frequently. And like the kids are having these symptoms and this person's having this and this person's having this. And then I did a couple pods on my show a while back with Dr. Jill Krista, who's one of the like leaders in terms of mold literate doctors. She actually trains and certifies doctors to understand how mold impacts the body. And we had like this whole series of episodes where we were talking about success stories of people, right? Because I feel like a lot of times it's just, oh, here's the mold, find the mold, where's the mold? Here it is, get rid of it. Oh, mold, 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 mold. And it's like
Yeah.
we need hope at the same time that like this is something that can be fixed, right? And the short of it is it absolutely is. I see it happen all the time. But we did some episodes and we talked through some examples of different people and like where they handled their mold situation. All of a sudden they started feeling better, right? The body's meant to detox. The body is meant to survive these types of things. The problem and it's not just the body, it could be machines, it could be anything. When you overload it with too much of whatever the problem is, it just can't keep up. And at some point, it's too much and it fails, right? And so that's what happens a lot with people where mold exposures are impacting them. There's just too much that's constantly being breathed in and brought into their system, and their body just can't keep up with detoxing and the pathways and all that stuff. And eventually it can't. And then, think of a funnel that you pour water in too fast, it overflows. And now here comes immune responses, histamine responses, inflammatory responses, like all the things that now start happening all over the body. So it is very, very possible for people to get better from this. But the first thing you have to do is stop the thing that's overwhelming the immune system.
Yeah.
And so when that's done first, and then you work with your doctor, your practitioner, who's now supporting your body to make it more resilient, make it more effective at handling these things, it's like that combination where you start seeing that people, are able to come back.
What is one of the more extreme cases of you've seen someone, and I'm picturing someone who's lived in their house for multiple years, and then all of the sudden they're experiencing this really severe symptom. And it sounds like what you're talking about with the funnel is their body has been able to defend itself for so long. It's been years, and then all of the sudden maybe they are dealing with extra stress. Maybe there's been a change in diet that has slowed down their detoxification, or for whatever reason, maybe a medication, you don't know. And then all of a sudden, the detoxification process has been halted or impaired for whatever reason. What is one of the more extreme cases that you've seen? Because I have a friend who's struggling with something very specifically with digestion. And I'm like, oh, this came off out of nowhere. Could this be mold in the house? Because she can't think of any other thing in her life that's changed. What are one of the
Mhm.
more extreme cases that you have seen? Again, this is more of a story of hope.
Yeah. I was like, I think kid cases are always the ones that like stay with me a little longer, just because, kids, like it's rough.
Yeah.
Um, there was this kid, this girl, she lived with her dad, and she was like deteriorating might not be the right word, but it was just like it was getting worse and worse and worse, kind of, what her symptoms and stuff look like. They ended up taking her to get what's called a neuroquant brain scan. Think of like an MRI for your brain, basically, is kind of what it is. And when they look at those, they're looking for inflammation in the brain, is kind of what you can see in those things. And so, generally, you don't want this thing lighting up like a Christmas tree, right? Like you want it because that shows that there's more inflammatory, reactions happening in your brain. This girl's, from what the dad had told us, the tech who ran the neuroquant said that this was the most lit up brain that they've ever seen.
Ugh, Angel
So
Girl.
yeah, and so she was having a whole host of problems, as a result of that, right? And so this particular person had had other inspectors out to the house, and they like couldn't figure out what was going on, right? And this is like a very common story. It's like, oh, we had a local inspector and they said everything's fine, or oh, well, we go in the attic, and there's just mold all over the attic right above her bed. So actually very similar to like I was sleeping in a room where it was like all around me, right? Like that's kind of my, so this is a very similar thing. It was like right above her in the attic, right above her place, right?
So
And
you
like
could
these
see
are,
it visibly. You could just walk in and see it.
yeah, I mean these people that went up, I don't even think they went in they must not even gone in the attic. They just
Yeah,
must
that's
not.
what I'm thinking. I'm like, how could you? And I don't know this business, but okay.
Or the other thing that happens a lot with these, more of these like localized inspectors is that they'll see mold like on framing in an attic, and they'll just call it lumber mold, and then because you've named it something that doesn't sound like a problem, now all of a sudden it's not a problem. There's so
Yes.
many little things that happen in which is a shame. But anyways, so found this big thing, right? And you test it, and it's the types of molds that they're finding toxins in the butt. It's like all the connective tissue is there, right? And so, it's interesting because when you do things like this, there's another story about a kid who this one more recently moved into the place that they moved into, was really healthy, playing sports, like all that stuff as a kid, moves into that house within less than a year. He's in a wheelchair and a feeding tube. And then
My
Same thing,
gosh.
doctor to doctor to doctor, ends up finding a doctor who understands how mold works, how it impacts the body, figures out there's an issue, then sends them to us. We go in, and like their situation was actually unique because it's not like there was mold all over the house, but the HVAC system was bad. So your heating air conditioning system is pumping air through the whole house, right? So it was in a basement. The basement had some moisture issues. The thing was so bad that it was just blowing this stuff into this kid's room. And his body had like a very acute, like strong reaction, right?
Mm.
So like his bounce back was a lot faster once they handled that, right? Like they didn't have to like gut their whole house, right? It was like a few things, and the HVAC was kind of like a high priority thing that was a big contributor. And they did some other stuff, but um, then come back and find out the kid, within another year is like being himself again is fine, right?
Wow.
So it's I want to say easier because it really sucks if that's your situation, but it's easier if it's like something that happens like on a snap like that, where you can kind of more
Yes.
pinpoint, like I moved into this place and then immediately this started happening, right? Like it kind of helps drive it.
Like there's only one common there's only one control group, if you will. Like there's only one thing that's really changed. Whereas if it's over years and years, it's a number of different things and situations and lifestyle changes could have happened. And it's this more insidious situation, like we were talking about earlier. So y'all really are, you're like house doctors. You're just doctors for not just doctors for house, but you're a doctor going in to diagnose. And what's interesting is what you said about your protocol. You said that someone will call, say, "Hey, there's something going on in our house. Can you please come check it? We're dealing with these issues." Whereas a lot of other mold companies, of course, this is the reason why we're talking today, is because you're not just a house inspector. You deal more so for the health benefit of your clients. And that's really the genesis of what y'all are doing. But you think about a mold inspector, oh, I'm buying a house. I'm gonna make sure the mold is inspected first, and then maybe our purchase is contingent on them fixing the mold or something like that. But it's never, oh, little Sally is dealing with seizures. Like, could this be our house? What is when you guys go in, you have a conversation, you test. Oh, can you explain? And I'm sorry, I'm gonna sound like a kindergartner here, but we're all thinking it, or some of us are. What is mold? And like what is actually doing if I have a pile of mold in a bowl in my hands and I inhale, I'm not going to do this, but and I inhale, what's going on?
Oh, all right. Stick your face in the mold bowl. Okay.
Stick your face in the mold bowl. That's what we need to do because I'm picturing it as if you're living in a house with mold and your HVAC is blowing it on you. It's the same exact thing. That's how I picture it. I can't even open my mouth or breathe through my mouth in a public restroom. Like I am so weird about bacteria when it comes to that. So this is how I picture mold in my home is a bowl of mold in front of me, like cereal.
Yeah, it's fun. I've never thrown that analogy out. Well, let me specifically like a couple ways mold can impact you, but then I could tie it back to how like it works through the house and like and maybe like make more sense for people. But like mold, there's kind of like two key things that it's going to do. It's either going to trigger an immune response, right? So at minimum, all mold is an allergen. Meaning if you have an allergen, your body is going to do some sort of reaction to it at some point, right? Now, if it's a very little amount and you're not very sensitive, your body might clock it and be like, ah, it's fine, like whatever, I'm not that worried about it, right? Whereas if you're somebody who is more sensitive or who was exposed when they were younger and you almost like trained your body to be afraid of that mold type because you were breathing it when you were young and susceptible, then you might breathe that same thing and your body sees it and it's like red alert, going crazy, right? So from an immune response, that's kind of one piece of it. Then you kind of related to that, you have mast cells, which are essentially what regulates your histamine release. And so there's a condition that it can kind of evolve into, which is mast cell activation syndrome, which is just kind of like your histamines are just firing all the time, and that is a big issue too, right? So um, that's kind of one side. The other side of it is out, not the allergen piece, but the toxicity piece of it. So molds can create a chemical toxin. Now, the toxin is not the mold, which a lot of people I think get confused on. They think toxic
Oh,
is toxic, and it's not actually how it works. The mold itself is a living organism. It's not a chemical. So the organism can create a chemical. So think of it, imagine it like a volcano, right? And let's say the volcano is your mold colony. And let's say there's other mold or bacteria coming over to try to eat its food, right? Because at its core, mold is basically just eating food, right? That's what it's doing. If it has enough moisture and it has the right material, it's going to go in like a seed, essentially, grow, and now it starts eating and decomposing. Like that's what it's supposed to do in nature, right? So it's doing that. So to protect itself, certain mold types have a chemical it can create to protect its territory and itself from other mold and bacteria and stuff coming over there. So if you think about this volcano, the toxin is the lava that comes out of the volcano. So lava covers the volcano, creates like a little toxic lava moat around the volcano. And now as these other things come over, they touch the lava, they die, right? It's a chemical meant to kill living things. That's
I
what the chemical
see.
to do.
Okay.
Now, what happens now, your whole volcano is covered in lava now. So now let's say rocks come off, pebbles come off the volcano. Well, they've been covered in this lava chemical now. Now, every particle that comes off of that moving forward is going to be covered in a toxin. So the way that the toxin aerosolizes is that because it covered the colony, any piece or spore or fragment that comes off the colony is now laced with the chemical, right? That's how it becomes airborne, and that's how we breathe it. And so they're two separate things, but they can be kind of covered on each other and sort of like come together, right? So the toxic piece of it is, again, these are toxins meant to kill living things, right? It's just microbiological level living things. We are much larger than that. So it's not
Yeah.
going to like kill us like that, but it can really wreak havoc on our cellular structure, which is much smaller than us, right? You start getting back down to that size. A really big impact on our cellular structure, on mitochondrial function, on immune regulation, on
The small
organs.
parts of us that make us us. Yeah.
Exactly. On your microbiome in your gut, like all this stuff. It could have a big impact on all that. And that's why it can be impacting you in so many different ways. What that's going to do is create this inflammatory response. So the difference between like an allergen and an inflammation, an allergen is like an immediate reaction, almost like an allergy, right? Like, oh, I got runny eyes, I got this. That's like a histamine response in a way, right?
Hmm.
Inflammation is your insides are on fire, essentially. And that's what's happening, right? And so they're two very, very different things, but it's two mechanisms that it can impact you, right? So
Yeah.
there's two different ways. So now if you like zoom out and like talk about like, well, how am I impacted in the house? Like, how does it get to me, right? You,
Yes, because
yeah.
I'm picturing just in your laundry room, there's sitting water somewhere and that's where it's going to build. But then I saw pictures of there's mold on clothes in your closet, but like the clothes that are next to your clothes that you wear every single day. What do we do?
Mhm.
Is it actually everywhere in that sense? Or could it be?
So yes and no. There's always going to be mold in a house, right? So the goal of all of this is not to come in and be like zero mold. You're never going to be exposed to it again. Like that's not possible. It's like it's a piece of nature. Like there's nothing you can do about it, right? The goal is to reduce the amount of exposure. Like if you go way back in time to like caveman times, mold was around then. Yes, this
Mm.
is another thing that unsupportive partners will say, we've been dealing with this for 10,000 years. The cavemen had it. And it's, like, what's going on? I'm like, were you alive when the cavemen were here? Like, what
Wasn't
was that?
life expectancy like 25?
Yeah. I was like, well, everybody died a lot sooner then. So was it this? Who knows? Maybe it was this. Um, but if you think about like where they lived, it was caves, right?
Yes.
Open, open airflow. It's not trapped to the outside. Caves have big openings that come in. And so you had more diluted air coming in and out of your space at all time, right? So it's, when you talk medical and you kind of compare it's like dose and duration, right? And that's how you understand like how much you're impacted by something, right? So dose, dilution would reduce dose,
Yeah.
right? So if there's, X amount of mold in here, but I'm diluting it with all the air that's coming in, now my dose is down, right? That's why you could do like apple cider vinegar, but you have to pour it in a bunch of water to dilute it because if you did it by
Yeah.
itself, it would rip your insides apart, right? And so it's kind of like the same idea. And so it's trying to balance out like how much can an individual handle versus not. You look at our houses now, they're airtight boxes,
Mm-hmm.
right? Not only are they all built out of food that mold is going to grow on, all the drywall, all the wood framing, all the like all that stuff is just meant for mold to grow on it. Then we seal them up airtight because we're so concerned about energy efficiency. And when we do that, we've now removed any sort of dilution that's occurring in our house, which means that any problem in the house, it just kind of continues and magnifies and gets worse and worse and worse, and it increases the load of the dose that's happening. So now
It's
you
like
have
air on an
higher,
airplane just getting recycled through and through.
yeah. And so then you have higher, more dose, more dose, more dose starts building up. And oh, by the way, duration, we spend 90% of our time indoors. So
Yeah.
cavemen probably spent 90% of their time outdoors. They had stuff to do, right? They had
Yeah.
food to kill and they had things to do, right? So it's like it's very different. Our lifestyles and how we live now doesn't really help the cause on the mold exposure piece, right?
Interesting.
So the thing we could control is the water. Like that's the thing we can control. Our houses are built out of what they're built out of. So it's our job to try to protect those from getting wet because that's like watering the seed that would allow mold to grow, right? And so that becomes the thing that we can control. We have to be really aware of. And the way exposure works in a house, we don't stick our face in a bowl, right? That's not how it works. So then, like, how does it get to us? And then how do you backtrack a solution to reduce what's getting to you, right? So I use this analogy for people to like visualize. So imagine there's like a factory off the side of the street. This is your mold factory. They're just cranking out mold in there. Buy the mold, hawking the mold, get the mold, right? They're making it in there. And then out of the top, smoke comes out of the top of the factory, right? That's the byproduct of what they're making, right? And let's say you live in a house a half a mile down the way and you walk outside. You're breathing the smoke that came out of the factory, right? You're breathing the air pollution, if you will, that came out of the factory. So if you ask somebody, they'll be like, you got a real bad air pollution problem where you live. You're like, yeah, but kind of. I actually have a really bad factory problem where I live. The air pollution is just how it's impacting me, but the factory is really the problem, right? And this is how it works in houses. So the factories become the places where mold is hiding throughout your house, behind a wall, behind a shower, in a ceiling, maybe by the base of a toilet, in a cabinet, like all these different places where it could be hiding. And oh, by the way, the majority of mold isn't visible when you look in there.
Ugh.
So, so then it's like, okay, how do we like even know and figure out where it is, which we could get into in a minute. But um, that's where the factories are. Now, what the factories are doing, they're pumping out that smoke that's getting into your breathable living space in the house, right? Now, when smoke goes into the air in your house, two things are going to happen. One, your heating air conditioning system is going to suck it up into the heating air conditioning system. What that does is it ends up contaminating your air conditioning system if there's a high load of mold in the house because you're constantly pulling the particles and the spores and all that stuff up into the system. When you open the system, it's not going to look like there's mold in it if
Mm.
that's what's happening. You're going to see dust and dirt in there. You're not going to see mold growing all over stuff. It's the composition of the dirt and the dust. And do they have mold fragments? Do they have toxin fragments in it? And that's what builds up in your system. And then when you turn your HVAC on, it spits it out, right? And so that's how Sally sitting in a room, when you turn the air conditioner on, that's how mold in the air conditioner impacts her. But if you open up the air conditioner, there's not mold growing all over it, right? So you have your HVAC guy come out, they're like, oh, your air conditioner's fine.
Yeah.
There's nothing
So
in
if you
there.
don't see it with the naked eye, it's hard to diagnose really. Then what are some, f- let's say you're not experiencing any symptoms, but you are curious about your own home. So for me, I live in a new apartment building, and it's not a big apartment building. It's pretty small. There's only maybe like 20 units, whereas a typical apartment building might have 100, 200, 300. I have no idea. Smaller space, fairly new, but it rains here. I mean, we're in an apartment building. There's someone above me, there's someone behind me. I don't know. What are some things that we could be doing today to either mitigate potential risk of mold or reduce or check, or what are some things we can do today?
Yeah, few things. One, mold does need water to grow. It does not need water to stay. That is the big misconception in the industry.
Oh,
I water a plant, plant grows. I stop watering the plant, the plant doesn't like get up and move to go find a new watering pot. The plant stays there. It starts to fold over, the leaves start to break off, but the plant is still there, right? So, with that being said, the first thing to think about is there anywhere in your house where there has been any sort of leak or something that's occurred in the past, even if you fixed it, right? Because if the water was there and allowed it to grow, and then you fix let's say a garbage disposal under your kitchen sink. Oh, it leaked one time, or water got into the cabinet, but we dried it out really quick and we got the garbage disposal fixed, right? That could be an area where there's mold hiding under the bottom of your cabinet, for example, right?
Ugh.
So the first thing is like kind of take inventory of any known, and they don't have to be big floods, right? A lot of people think it's big floods. It could be small things like leaks, little drips, things that, my dishwasher overflowed one time, like just, things like that. So that's one thing. That'll be one thing you could think of. The next thing, the areas where there is more water is a higher probability of a problem occurring there, right?
Mm.
So where in your house do you have the most water going on? Under sinks, you got all your plumbing under there, you got your faucets, you got all that stuff under there. By showers, by toilets, right? Your water heater, your washing machine, your dishwasher. These are like water, areas, and you're going to have a higher probability of some sort of water intrusion around a place where the water's flowing all the time, right? So the next thing is go look around those areas specifically, right? Now you're not looking for mold. To simplify it, look for inconsistencies in the building material somewhere. So, for example, if it's by a shower, this happens all the time by showers, there's a wall that comes up to where the shower starts, right? And then your shower starts.
Yeah.
Look at the baseboard on that wall. Is that baseboard pulling off the wall a little bit? Is it a little
Mm.
stained? Is it
Is it like
like bubbled
warped?
a little? Is it warped? That means water's getting into the wall, right? And so you can look for, and when I say inconsistencies, it's like if I see something that looks weird, just look 4 feet over to the right or the left and see if it looks the same. And
Yeah.
if it doesn't, then why does it look different right here? Right? Now, to dig deeper into it, the kind of the secret on how we find things is we don't look for mold. We'll find it when we're looking around, but we don't actually look for that. We look for signs of previous water intrusion that have since dried. That's what
Mm.
we're looking for. So bubbling paint, a warping floorboard, like you mentioned, maybe cracking and peeling, things like that. Those are the clues that our eye can see. And then we know that moisture is the precursor to mold growth. So if I'm seeing something that I know that moisture can create, then that becomes an area that I want to test to see if there's a hidden mold problem that's behind the area, right? So I would do like an inventory and just like a look through of all your kind of high water volume areas and see if you're seeing stuff like that. As far as preventative things, sinks, if you drop me down anywhere and you were like, your life depends on you finding mold in this house, I would be going to a sink cabinet. That's where I would be going.
Yeah.
It's just, there's a few things that happen in there. One, you have usually plumbing lines in the wall underneath it that are behind the cabinet. Then you have all the fixtures that could drip down into the cabinet itself. And then all the products that we put in our sink cabinetry, the base ingredient is water in every single one of them. So they are all their own water source, every single one. And so somebody like, oh, well, that's from a bottle. Look at the ingredients. Is there water in this thing?
Yeah.
There you go. I had in my kitchen sink cabinet one time. This is when that triggered for me. I opened my cabinet. I see a bottle like exploded, like pressure exploded or something, right? And then I see there's mold on the cabinet. I'm like, oh. And so I go get my mask and all my, because I have all the stuff at my house. And so I'm like, I'm like ready to go. And I clear everything out and I like seal the area up for now so I could get it handled. And then I look at the bottle that exploded. It was a mold cleaning tile spray for bathrooms.
Uh,
That bottle exploded and caused mold to grow everywhere because the main ingredient in all of this stuff is water, right? So for sink cabinets, what I have in every one of my sink cabinets right now, I have like a rubber insert that goes on the floor of every single one of them. There's like a little lip on the side that'll, comes up a little bit. It could basically hold like a gallon of water without it impacting your cabinet, right?
okay. Okay.
So
So
it
create a
protects from the
physical
product
barrier.
bottles. Yeah. So from the product bottles that leak or the faucet that leaks or all these things, you're now kind of protecting the material and giving yourself some time to get there and figure it out. Put a water sensor under there, like Simply Safe has water sensors. You can do these things that kind of like flag it to you a little bit more so you can get ahead of it when these things start happening.
That's such
So
a simple task is to, and I bet we have like in most homes. I remember when I was first moving in here, you put rubber underneath the silverware drawer so that it doesn't move. I bet there are sheets and sheets of that that even having some type of plastic or silicone barrier would be beneficial, and that's something we could easily do today instead of, okay, we're going to tear out all the baseboards, but
yeah, I
that's
mean,
one.
for those listening, WeatherTech makes the ones that I have. They like size to like any cabinet. They usually make like they primarily make like car stuff for like,
Yeah,
live in the snow or whatever. They'll put liners on the floor, but they make these sink things. I was like, oh, that's cool. So I have, I don't know, 6 sinks or something. All of them have one. Every single one.
perfect.
Yeah.
Is This is a mini tangent, but I thought of it earlier thinking of one of my girlfriends who had said she said that she had been dealing with something hormonally and it was not all of the sudden, but she it was experiencing symptoms that she was really, really surprised about and she
Mhm.
had no idea where it was coming from, what is going on. Do you notice more so female, because I feel like again, the intuition is there. Do you notice anything specific hormonally with women? And not to say that you need to give a full rundown diagnostic of a hormone panel, but are you seeing a lot of trends in that area with women?
Hormones is a big thing. I actually have a list up now of like all symptoms by body system in the body. Hormones are a big thing. They do really get impacted by this stuff. Like if you're looking like mild impact, you're looking like maybe fatigue or maybe appetite or stuff like that. Then you get to like significant health impact, and maybe it's like, more debilitating fatigue, or maybe like you aren't handling body prep temperature properly. A big one is unexplained weight gain or weight loss is a really big one that's tied to hormone issues that come from
Okay.
this. Hair loss, mood swings, obviously menstrual cycle stuff. So then you start getting into like PCOS and all that stuff. But like all of that is connected here.
Super
Um,
interesting because I can name on 10 hands the amount of friends I have who said, "Yeah, my doctor said I have PCOS." And I'm thinking, how we all got PCOS right now? How is this real or is this not real? But I just feel like there are so many broad symptoms and this is something to really look at.
yeah.
Because
I mean, even in kids, like early puberty,
yes.
it's another hormone imbalance, and this can be a trigger for that, right? So,
Yeah.
I mean, there's thyroid stuff. I mean, there's all kinds of things that it can tie into. So, yeah, the hormone issue is there's a big connection between the hormone and mold exposure piece.
Interesting. And I think that some big takeaway is what you're saying is that oftentimes you're not the first line of defense. You're if people have called their doctors, they've called their friends, they've called everyone, they've been dealing with these problems for so long, but they really it's almost it's almost the last thing you would think of. You're like your home is your safe space, it's your comfort zone. I also feel like there is this sense of, okay, well, if we do a mold inspection or we call these guys and they come out and say there's mold, then what? That means we have to do so much work. Like it is this daunting feeling, but nothing is more important than your health.
Can I expand on that for a
Oh,
second?
that's yes. This is
I did
it.
a
Yep.
I did a whole thing on this a little while ago, but it's really, really, really important, and it's a normal like human defense mechanism in a
Yeah.
way. That's technically what it is. So I'm kind of making some things up, but you'll get the concept. When it's fear of the unknown, when you don't know what can happen, you immediately start spiraling into the worst possible version of that future.
Yeah.
And then you start internalizing that as if it's going to happen. Then it starts creating all these stress responses and all these things that happen in the body. And that it hasn't even happened, right? Like I've experienced this when I used to get like, when I would call like the cable company way back when cable was a thing. And I'd be like annoyed that my cable went out when a game was on or something. And I'd be on the phone and the music is playing and I'm just like riling myself up. I'm like, so they're not going to come help me. They're not going to do this. Well, here's what I'm going to say. And next thing you know, I'm like angry on the
Oh
phone before
yeah.
it even answers. And then they're just like the most polite, wonderful person in the world. And like, we'll have somebody out there. And I get off the phone. I'm like, we had a really good cable system where I'm from. So they actually were known for customer service. I know most of them aren't. So like when that happened, then I get off the phone. I'm like, why was I just so riled up for no reason,
We
right?
catastrophize.
Yeah. And so I've thought about that a lot with this because it's like that's an example that people like really do. And so you kind of like future pace this worst case scenario. And it's really the unknown piece is the key word in that. It's the fear of the unknown. So that like the solution to that is become more aware and known of what's going on. And then you're able to actually assess it and react appropriately instead of making up these like really crazy scenarios of stuff that might be going on. And so what I want to like kind of tie up with all that, most of our clients don't remediate everything that we find. And this is the thing, it's like, oh, we're going to have, we inspect come in the house and God, they find everything. They find so much stuff. I'm going to fix so much stuff. Not necessarily. Like when you go to your doctor and you're like, I have X, Y, and Z going on, right? And they're going to run their panel of tests and they're just like, oh, well, this is out of balance and this and this and this. And they show you like 8 things that are off. They're not coming and like fix all 8 things right now. That's not what they're doing. They're like, hey, we think that like these couple things, we're going to focus on this and then we're going to kind of see how it goes, right? Maybe these other things will kind of balance out afterwards because we think these are maybe the key drivers of what's going on. They prioritize your plan of attack for you and they tell you exactly what to do. They tell you the dose to take. They tell you don't take your binder an hour before or after you eat something. They tell you all of these things and it's all laid out for you, right? We do the exact same thing. And that's the piece that a lot of times you don't think about, right? And especially before you picked up the phone and even talked to somebody about it, right?
Yeah.
Like you wouldn't know that that's what we do. But while we are incredibly good at finding problems, most of our clients don't do all of it. And you don't necessarily have to do everything to feel better, especially if you're not really severe in your symptoms to begin with, right? So the
Yeah.
idea, apply the 80/20 concept. How do I reduce my exposures as much as possible while maximizing the budget I have to attack that? And that becomes the plan that we lay out, right? So like if
Yes.
somebody's in that mindset, it doesn't hurt to like have a call that's free with somebody to like figure out how it goes. But so many people get paralyzed in that future fear stuff that they end up just staying. And like the question to ask is if I do nothing, is this going to get better? Like,
Yeah.
what would happen if I did nothing? Oh, the same thing that's been happening. What would happen if I did something? Probably something different, hopefully, right? Well,
Hmm.
let's explore that and see what that looks like at least and know that you're not, just thinking about it and exploring it doesn't put you on the hook for all of these things that you're afraid of.
Yeah. It could go better than you expected.
Hmm.
And then at least you know you have an answer. At least you know you have an answer. Uh, that's a really good perspective because, again, it, I don't want people to. It's the same thing as medicine. You think, oh, well, I'm going to take this hormone panel or I'm going to take this test or this lab, and it comes back with, oh, all of my levels are off, all of my mineral profiles are down, and blah blah blah. And the doctor or the functional medicine doctor would say, let's work on one or two things and go from there instead of saying, here's 46 supplements, enjoy, have fun peeing them all out. It's just you don't need it all. And you're not trying to make them boil the ocean. I have one last question before I let you go. But if someone is, so you said that you had a product under your sink that was for mold. You said this kills mold.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. You don't have to throw them under the bus, but you could tell me after this we stop recording. What product would you say everyone should have in their house when it comes to mold? And I know that we don't want to have a bunch of toxins, we don't want to have a bunch of chemicals, we don't have none of that, but we do want to get rid of mold. So, what's the one product you would recommend that each person have in their home for those hard, tough places?
Caveat that if mold is growing on surfaces like walls and cabinets and stuff like that, cleaning it doesn't get rid of it. Mold is
Wow.
like an iceberg. It has roots, it grows into stuff. So cleaning the top of it isn't going to solve the problem on the bottom. But what it's going to do is make your eye not look at it anymore. And then because we're so reliant on our eyes, we then kind of feel like out of sight, out of mind. I just want
Mm.
to throw that as a caveat. Now, there are certain things that you can surface clean, things like, glass and metal and tile and, things like that, can be cleaned.
So it's more
Um,
preventative. It's definitely more preventative.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely cases to clean stuff, right? I don't want to say like you can never do it, but at the same time, like if you have mold on your wall, like wiping the front of the wall is not going to solve the problem that's behind the
Sure.
wall. So there's a couple things. There's a product that's called Benefect Decon 30. It is antifungal, antibacterial. Forgot the essential oil off the top of my head. I want to say
Thieves?
I don't think it's thieves. I actually think it's thyme.
Oh, yeah.
Um, yeah, it's been a minute since I looked at it, but that's the active ingredients in essential oil. That's an antifungal, antibacterial, right? A lot of our clients end up using that in like the decontamination phase or the remediation piece. I'll have the remediator select that. So that's something that you can use, and it's easily sold. They even come in like you can get wipes of it if you want to. Like
Oh, wow.
there's
Yeah.
yeah. So I think that's like a good one that you can look at.
That's helpful. This has been very eye-opening. I wasn't sure what to expect because and I think that this is one of those topics where you don't have to get that scientific to understand that if you're feeling off in your own home, you leave for 5 days, you feel better, and then immediately things start to get wonky when you come home. It's worth the call. It's worth the adjustment and not from someone who's just going to say, oh, yeah, let's, like you said in the beginning, let's lay it out, check the air, and then, nothing's here. Impossible. Impossible. And I also, excuse me, I also believe that like we know our bodies better than anybody. So if something really feels off, we'll know it.
Absolutely. And listen, there's ways to like get into this too, right? If you're working with a doctor and they've kind of put the pieces together, I will say this, if a doctor ever is like, I think you have a mold problem, you have a mold problem. I've never had a client come from a doctor and not find multiple problems in their home. So
Really?
yeah, try like I always say this when I'm talking with doctors as well. Like trust the doctor who even knows how to look for this and is telling you this is a thing, right? Like I've never seen one be wrong personally. So that's one thing. Now, if that's the case, it's just a matter of now trying to find it and figure it out, right? And you could go straight to like inspection at that point, right? If that's something that you want to do. Now, if you're somebody who's like not working with a doctor specifically that gets this, or something I said here today was like, oh yeah, maybe that's a thing or whatever, but you're not like, hey, I'm not trying to have my whole house inspected right now. Like I don't know if I'm there yet.
Yeah.
Then we actually have we created a test kit too that's really
Oh,
meant to be like a screening tool for people. So it's called the dust test, the dusttest.com. And it just sends you a test kit, like when you order like those, Viome kits and all these other kits that are out there, right? Same kind of concept. Um, Basically a Swiffer cloth that you wipe dust in your house. Dust that settles on surfaces becomes where all of the particle that floats around settles, and it gets you a really good understanding of load of mold in a house. And so the test uses an EPA created panel from 10, 15 years ago. And then we overlay on an interpretation about what the load of the mold in the house is, right? So you have a high load of mold. Okay, I should maybe be thinking about this. If it's like a middle level, if I'm not super sick and it's middle, maybe I don't care that much, right? And if it's a low level, it's a low level, right? And it allows you to get like a look at it at like a relatively inexpensive entry point just to have a screening test to understand if there's something going on. So if that's where your head is at, you could do that pretty easily. It's quick, you get it done, you get a feel for what's going on, and then you can kind of go deeper if you need to. So it's, we inspected for the in it and the dust test for the screening on the front end. And either way, you can start getting some answers that you're looking for.
so it's the dust test and then the mycotoxin test,
So it's just the dust test is just the mold piece of
but
it.
those
So
would be the two tests that you would potentially recommend for someone who's dealing with mold or seeing if it's in their body.
yeah, so there's a couple like the body tests are different, right? So on the body test, there's a lot more variability in your body too.
Yeah.
Like I get asked like, should I be testing the body first or should we be testing the home first? And then I kind of like lay out like the options, right? So like when you test your body, I mentioned that urine mycotoxin test earlier, right? Well, there's 24% of the population that just doesn't detox environmental contaminants or it's very poor, right? If you're that person, let's say, and you've been exposed, you have a lot of toxins in your body that have built up, but your body can't push it out, you can do a urine test that shows nothing. And it doesn't
Mm.
mean that you don't have toxins in your body. It means your body can't move it, right? And so looking at that one test, because there's variability in like how the result comes out, can change your interpretation of whether I do or don't have a problem, right? On the flip side, you can detox super, super well, and you can see toxins like coming into this thing, but you might not have a significant load potentially, right? It just means that your gates are really open and you can flush things, right? So
Yeah.
there's some nuance to looking at them. There's also blood tests for inflammatory markers. There's other urine tests for organic acids and different things that might spike for whatever's going on. So the body piece of it is,
A
it's
little more
tough.
volatile. Yeah.
Yeah. Whereas the house, the dust is the dust. There's no body telling me that I'm going to detox this or not. The analysis is way more true on the home testing. So like I would always tell somebody, start with the home test, just see if it's here. If it's not here, then why are we digging in the other piece?
Yeah, it's low stakes. Then
Mhm.
okay, maybe that's just your gateway into more discovery. Okay, that's
Exactly.
good to
Yeah.
know. That's good to know. Well, Brian, I had no idea I was going to learn so much about mold today. Actually, that's a total lie. I knew today. I didn't know 2 weeks ago that I'd be learning today about this much mold, but I appreciate you so much. Where can everybody find you and what, where can everybody find you so that they can get all this mold goodness?
Yeah. Everybody wants the moldy goodness. I
Give me
got
the
you.
mold.
Yeah. So again, my company's We Inspect. Yes, weinspect.com. Free phone calls. Literally just call if you feel like there's something going on. It's easy. Thedusttest.com is where that test kit is that I just talked about. My podcast is Mold Finders Radio. I talk like this all the time or ever. And then Instagram is probably my best like hub for like social stuff. So it's at Mold Finders on Instagram.
You have a lot of good snippets on your Instagram. I was looking at it earlier, and there's a lot of quick bite-sized pieces of, hey, look at this. Hey, here's an interesting question. And I really had a good time deep diving on your Instagram earlier. So you guys should definitely check it out if you just have more questions about this whole topic. But I tried to get in there and talk about as much what are the women dealing with because it's typically the women who are saying, honey, we got to deal with this situation in the house. Like they're the intuitive ones. It's just what it is.
It is. It's what
I
we
do
see too.
believe that.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so, so much for your time. And I really appreciate all the information.
Thank you so much as well. I appreciate you having me on. As you can tell, I like talking about this stuff. So anytime somebody gives me the opportunity to share with new people, I'm very excited. So thank you.
We are lucky to have you, and we'll make sure we put all of this information in the show notes so that everyone can find you guys. Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode of Hotter Than Health. Make sure you follow us at Hotter Than Health Podcast on Instagram, Eliza G Wellness on Eliza G _wellness on Instagram. Leave us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts or simply follow us on Spotify. We will talk to you next week.